And then there was Trump. The former president has no challengers left for the Republican nomination. It looks like we're getting a rematch, Trump versus Biden for the White House. Both men won big on Super Tuesday, but who can translate those results to a general election? Nikki Haley's exit from the Republican race cleared the path for Trump. She expressed no regrets and offered no endorsements.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him.
This evening, I'll ask the UK's former ambassador to the United States, Lord Darrick, what a second Trump presidency would mean for us. And we're live in Paris to talk about an increasing terror threat, which has just forced Olympic officials to scale down plans for this summer's opening ceremony. Plus, how much of your money should be spent on foreign aid, an issue missing from today's budget, protecting British pounds or neglecting the world's poorest. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Month by month, one by one, Donald Trump's rivals have been falling away. Now there's no one left. The last major challenger for the Republican nomination has called it quits. Nikki Haley, who was Trump's ambassador to the UN during his time in the White House, today ended her campaign. Results on Super Tuesday saw her lose all but one primary. In Donald Trump's words, she was trounced. No surprise then that she refused to endorse him, saying he must own the voters that backed her. And there's plenty of them. Hundreds of thousands of people voted for Haley over Trump. The question, where do those votes turn now? Trump? Or maybe, just maybe, Joe Biden. He says he has a place for Haley's supporters, but could they really switch from red to blue? Little surprises us these days. Think about the extraordinary situation we're in. January 6th and all the fallout that followed, multiple court dates, nothing seems to have derailed the Trump juggernaut. So here we are, gearing up for what's likely to be a rematch between the two oldest presidential candidates in history. What does that say about the state of the two main parties? Well, first, our US correspondent James Matthews has sent this report from Charlottesville, Virginia, one of the only counties that voted more heavily for Haley than for Trump.
You might call this place Trump versus Biden ground zero. Charlottesville, Virginia is where a white nationalist rally sparked riots in 2017 with fatal consequences. Donald Trump said there were fine people on both sides. Joe Biden said those remarks inspired him to run for president in 2020. Cue the rerun in 2024. There was no Trump endorsement from Nikki Haley as she pulled out of the Republican race.
I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind."
The crowd that followed Haley is the crowd Trump will need. From that crowd, we found a couple downtown.
I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. Although I'm a lifelong Republican, I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump if he was running for dog catcher.
Why?
How much time do you have? He's deranged. He's a threat to humankind, to the planet, to the world, to world peace.
I will not vote for Trump.
Why not?
I don't trust that man. I wouldn't trust that man to be in my house, and I wouldn't in my personal house with my wife or my daughter, and I wouldn't trust him in the White House either.
Super Tuesday was just another Tuesday in much of America. Donald Trump's advance a foregone conclusion.
Close the borders, fix the economy, give us back some law and order, some respect.
It doesn't represent what I would stand for. Not things I would stand for, no.
I did vote for him 8 years ago, but I really don't know that he is what we need in this country right now again.
Donald Trump's Super Tuesday speech was a call for unity as he eyes the presidential election.
I've been saying lately, success will bring unity to our country, and it happened before. We had the best economy our country's ever had.
And so the United States has a presidential rematch, its first for 70 years, and almost certainly its most negative. Already, both men are shaping the next 8 months as a referendum on the other. As polls reflect a public despair at their choice, in which, for both men, weaknesses are seen to outweigh strengths. James Matthews, Sky News, in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Well, in a moment, we'll be getting the thoughts of Lord Durrick, a former UK ambassador to the United States, and Nimco Ali, formerly an advisor to the UK government and campaigner on preventing violence against women. But let's go first to the United States and speak with our Mark Stone. I mean, Mark, no real surprises that Nikki Haley has fallen away. But I guess the big question is, what happens to all those votes?
Hi, Yalda. Yeah, I mean, that is one of a number of questions, a number of takeaways from today. But weren't those interviews in James's report absolutely fascinating? I think in those interviews you get a sense of where Donald Trump's problems still lie. Those people who are Republican but who can never vote for Donald Trump, the never-Trumpers, those are the people that will keep him up at night, I think. Look, broadly, the first takeaway clearly is that it was a great, great night for Donald Trump. Of course, the pundits here in America are trying to spin it one way or the other. The fact is it was an extraordinarily good night for a man that had been written off when he lost the last election, written off again during the midterms a few years ago, involved in so much controversy, so many court cases, but he is the only one still standing because a huge proportion of people across this country still think he is the man to lead the country. That is the first takeaway, but beyond that, there are others too. Neither Joe Biden nor Donald Trump should be complacent. Donald Trump, yes, he won, but as I said, underneath that, drill down a bit, you see that Nikki Haley did do not really quite well in some states. Her numbers were quite strong. Those are the people who won't, among those are people who will never vote for Donald Trump. The question, as you posed, is what do they do? Will they vote for Biden? Some will, clearly, as you saw just now. But some won't vote at all. Now, that's a real problem for Donald Trump, because if it is a Trump-Biden rematch, and it looks set to be, then it will, the polls suggest, be very, very close indeed. If people don't turn out to vote for Donald Trump in November, then he's in trouble. That's something to watch. On the Joe Biden side, he can't be complacent either. He's literally one trip up away from being in massive trouble. Everyone is watching his age. Everyone is seeing his frailty, and they are looking for problems there. So there's an issue with that. Minnesota was interesting. Remember what happened last week in Michigan? High Arab population, a massive protest vote there. It happened again in Minnesota last night, and so Gaza is a problem for Biden there. Lots of takeaways, not such a Super Tuesday in terms of the grand scheme of things, but by heck, a massive Super Tuesday for Donald Trump.
Yeah, in that sense, as you say, massive for Donald Trump, an anticlimax because we kind of knew how it was going to unfold. But I guess the other question is, this very much feels like Back to the Future, circa 2020. How did we get here?
It really did. Watching as we were in the middle of the night, your time, the speech at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it really was Back to the Future in every sense. The set down at his mansion in Mar-a-Lago, the speech, the rhetoric, it was all there. The music, the theme tune, everything was there. And yet, you have to take a step back. I mean, it is remarkable. He lost the last election. He still claims he won it, but he lost. And at that point, people had written him off because of what happened in that building. That alone. The insurrection, was it a riot, was it an insurrection, whatever it was, many people believe it was inspired, it was orchestrated by Donald Trump, and he faces a court case, one of 4, for precisely that, a man who tried to overthrow the government in this country, it is alleged, and yet he is now the one man who Joe Biden needs to beat in a race that is is likely to be an absolute roller coaster.
Mark, thank you so much for all of your reporting and all of your analysis there. Well, let's get the thoughts now of our panel, former UK ambassador to the United States, Lord Durrick, and former UK government advisor and campaigner on preventing violence against women, Nimco Ali. Thank you both for joining us. Lord Durrick, I'll come to you first because there are so many takeaways here. And as Mark was saying there, neither side can be complacent. I mean, although many would say, after everything that Trump has been through, he is like Teflon. neither side can sort of sit back and think, OK, the next 9 months is going to be comfortable.
He is indestructible, Donald Trump. And you're right, very few of us would have thought he would be where he is now when he lost the election back in 2020. But as your correspondent identified absolutely correctly, he will be worried about the never-Trumpers in the Republican Party and whether they will come back to him or whether they will not vote or vote for Biden. He'll be worried about suburban women who went heavily for Biden in 2020 for reasons we can all imagine. He'll be worried about the independents, neither Republican nor Democrat Party members, who again went heavily for Biden in 2020. Now remember, Trump lost by 6 million votes, popular vote in 2020. Where is he going to find, how's he going to make up that gap if he's not recapturing people whom he lost last time?
And I think, to that point, he lost the popular vote, 6 million votes. But something like 74 million Americans still voted for him.
They did. But I think the whole point is that it's changed. So since 2020, what's also changed is the fact that his impact on the Supreme Court and on women's rights has really taken hold. So I think there is going to be a proper outcry from young people and especially from liberals and women. Well, that's what I'm hoping for anyway.
I mean, I guess Joe Biden also has these issues around young people. We saw what Mark was saying there about what happened in Michigan and also then what happened in Minnesota.
Yeah.
The kind of younger people, the Arab Americans coming out unhappy with the foreign policy.
He has 3 problems, Joe Biden. Number one, his age. Nothing you can do about that unless he invents a time machine. Second, the economy is not performing in a way that is delivering to the American people. Well, that's what the polls say. And third, his Gaza policy is upsetting a lot of the young progressive Republicans, Democrats, particularly from the Arab American community. Now, he will hope that the Israeli ground offensive in Gaza is over by the time the election comes round and that he has delivered a ceasefire and maybe an exchange of hostages and looks to have done a constructive role there. On the economy, the last quarter of the American economy grew by 3.3%. The chairman of the Fed has said 3 interest rate falls this year.
It's not translating to approval ratings.
Not yet. But he would keep his fingers crossed that it does start to. We're still, 7 months off the election, so there's time.
We've just got some news that's come through. Donald Trump posting on social media site Truth Social, because, of course, he's no longer really on X. Donald Trump on Truth Social calling for debates with US President Joe Biden. That's according to Truth Social. So it's all getting underway now.
It is all getting underway, and it's going to be 8 months of some kind of terrible show. But I think the whole point is that America needs to really understand that this is not just about their own future, but it's about the future of the world. And in a situation where we have global democracy on its knees, I think we do need a US president and also a system that actually really understands global security and really puts things forward. So I think it's not just about America and who they vote for president, but who we have in the world as well.
Because it does impact, the wider sort of foreign policy. On that note, I just want to show our viewers these images that have come through today from Odessa. We saw President Zelensky meeting there with the Greek Prime Minister, and they were nearly struck by a Russian missile. The realities of this conflict sort of hit us every single day. At the same time, this is an ongoing discussion and debate in the United States. Donald Trump has famously said he'll end this war in 24 hours.
Which is obviously a profoundly ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah.
But what he has said how he's going to do it, which he's going to say to Zelensky, no more American weapons for you, and to tell Putin, we'll go into a deal with that guy Zelensky. And the only deal that is conceivable in those circumstances is one in which Zelensky surrenders the 15% of Ukrainian territory that Russia holds, if not more. So I don't see a deal coming, but I do think that if American arms to Ukraine are stopped, it's very hard for Ukraine to even hold the territory they have. And be in no doubt, Putin's not going to settle for 15%. He wants to take Kyiv. He wants to instill a puppet government there. That's his ambition. And that's what he will try and do.
And Nimco, I mean, just to pick up on your earlier point there about these uncommitted voters, the anger, but also the anger around Biden flipping and flopping on his border security policies, toughening up in certain areas where voters well, certainly on the far left are quite angry about.
They are quite angry, but I think this election is going to have to be not about the case for Biden, but the case for America, and saying how destructive having Trump as a president is going to be for the future of America. So I think a lot of people might have to hold their noses in order to be able to vote for Biden, but I think they're going to have to vote for Biden for the greater good. And I say that as a woman, as an African, as an activist, it is not just about the war in Ukraine, but there's the war in Sudan, there's the war in the DRC. There are actually wars that are going on globally which are going to affect us throughout the next decade. And in order for those ones to be addressed, we actually need some serious people around the table again.
8 months is a long time in politics. I guess a year ago, we didn't think we'd be in this position. Who knows where we will be on November the 5th?
There are, as again your correspondent said, 4 criminal indictments, 91 indictments in total, 4 criminal cases against him. And at least a couple of those are going to be held before the election. And a recent opinion poll in the New York Times produced a figure of 24% Republican voters who said they would reconsider their support for Donald Trump if he had been convicted. So that's one big factor that is going to come into play. The conventions will obviously have some effect on their popularity. And the other thing that I have to say is going to count is how is Joe Biden going to do over the next 6 months when he gets into heavy campaigning with his history of physical stumbles and the odd mix-up of names and dates and things like that. Is he going to be okay? It'll be like walking on eggshells.
Yeah, very much so. We'll keep you right here because we've got lots more to discuss on the programme. Stay with us. Coming up on The World, we'll be live in Paris as security fears over terror attacks lead France to ban members of the public from this summer's Olympic opening ceremony.
A corner of North East Lincolnshire, far away from the politics of Westminster. Once a booming fishing port, now lays partly abandoned. Where Labour stood proud for decades, until the town turned blue. An unexpected turn for Grimsby and Cleethorpes. Regeneration is already underway. Hope is on the horizon. With a general election around the corner, Sky News gives voice to the people, exploring the issues that we're all facing and hearing what they want from the next Prime Minister. Each corner's got a story to tell you, but which way will the people vote this time round?
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent, and this is where I grew up. We can reveal that the driver who hit Harry Dunn is 42-year-old Anne Sakoulas.
Just met the president and we never thought we'd get this far.
This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
I never knew they would make it. It's amazing.
Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Welcome back. With me throughout tonight's show, former UK government advisor Nimco Ali and the former UK ambassador to the United States, Lord Darrick. Now, the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics this summer will be closed to both tourists and ordinary Parisians. The French government said the potential terror threat means the event will be invitation only, with guests subject to security checks. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports from Paris.
Paris is preparing to produce the world's biggest live show. A first Olympic opening ceremony through a city on water. A spectacular stage on the Seine for athletes. But there are just 20 weeks to deliver these games safely.
There's still a lot of work, indeed.
Sky News was given exclusive access today to a major logistical meeting, the last before the Games, with a global mix of sports officials and athletes hearing from Olympic chiefs. Just as the French government ordered the ambitious plans to be scaled back, the growing terror threat reducing the numbers allowed on the banks of the river to watch the ceremony, with free tickets now invitation only.
Busy time.
Busy time indeed. But the International Olympic Committee is determined to retain the ambition without unnecessary risk.
When would the plan become too risky to go ahead with it being staged through Paris?
You cannot plan for a plan B. It's far too big, too sophisticated, too complex artistically to look at a plan B in another location. Plan B, again, is reducing, adjusting, but it's that location. You see, these games were always designed around the highest possible security threat and security level.
Global conflicts and geopolitical tensions are increasing the threat on the ground, online and from the skies, with all Paris airspace closing throughout the opening ceremony.
Drones currently can be used as weapons, of course, and that there is a whole plan that is developed by the ministry. Safety and security first in any of the conversation. Do we plan for cyber security? Absolutely.
Some here fear security rather than sport taking over their city.
It's the means for security that will be taken that are very, very heavy. And Paris will be full of soldiers, I'm sorry for Paris, it's not a good advertising for my own city, which I love a lot. But I prefer to go in Greece for my holidays.
There will be a high level of security so we can feel comfortable in terms of safety and security.
They've been planning this unique opening ceremony here on the Seine for years, but the vast open setting as athletes parade down the river poses huge security challenges, and there are concerns these spectacular plans could be too great a risk. Olympic chiefs are determined to keep plans afloat for a spectacular opening ceremony with unprecedented scale and threat.
Well, Rob joins us now from Paris. And Rob, I mean, security around a major event like the Olympics is always a talking point, but is there something more here that we need to think about?
Well, it is those geopolitical tensions. They are lacing these preparations for the Games, perhaps like never before. Russia are banned as a team from competing over the invasion of Ukraine. That's created huge protests, of course, from the Russian Olympic Committee and, of course, the Israel-Hamas conflict, which has led organisers to suspect there could be protests around these Games, and they are actually welcome to that. They say they do acknowledge now that is something people might choose to do around these Games, although they are against any sort of activism in competition itself. But above all, they are hoping that these Olympics are a rebirth of the Olympic movement. We had the pandemic Games in Tokyo where there were no fans. Rio didn't quite have the crowds in 2016. And so we're thinking back to London in 2012 when we had those big audiences and attendances at sporting venues. They are hoping here for 500,000 fans a day in and around Paris coming into the venue safely. And the priority is, of course, keeping them safe. And it really is a plan that is so ambitious. And being in some of the meetings today, hearing about and they really want to try to bring a new energy to the Olympics, and particularly as it returns to Paris for the first time since 1924. The final preparations are underway, and unlike other Olympics, we're not talking about venues not being ready. It does seem very prepared, but all those challenges perhaps about things like traffic and public transport that might well dominate, but for now, it's all the security planning that is top of the agenda.
Rob, thank you so much for that update from Paris. Lord Derek, you were National Security Advisor during the 2012 Olympics. I mean, security is a major factor, no doubt, but this is highly unusual.
It is unusual. I mean, back in 2012, notwithstanding the title, there was a dedicated team. I wasn't in charge of security, but I went to all the meetings. And I can tell you was the single biggest issue. A huge amount of planning went into it. You might remember we had that little crisis a couple of weeks beforehand when G4S, who had got the contract for being in charge of security, hadn't hired enough people. And eventually we saw the British Army on the streets of London doing some of the security for it. So it was a huge preoccupation. In the end, it all went off brilliantly, but I can absolutely understand why this is such a huge issue and huge problem for the Paris Olympics, especially with an opening ceremony that is kind of all out in the open rather than in a stadium, if that's what I understand to be planned. And that would set extra security problems, which may be the reason, I mean, apart from that, the opening ceremony will be watched by billions around the world. So if you want to make an impact as a terrorist, what better target than that? But no, it's a huge, huge problem, as it will be throughout the duration of the Olympics. Huge task for them.
Yeah, indeed. Nimco, this is sort of quite sad when you think about the legacy of the Olympics.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that 100%. So 2012, as I was saying, was an incredible time for London, and my niece was just born in 2012. So we were actually literally a few weeks ago talking about the fact that the Olympics are so close and how nice it might be just to get the Eurostar to go. So I think to kind of create this fear around it, which is the reality in terms of the world that we live in right now, it is a very sad thing, which is meant to be a sporting occasion when the world's meant to come together on equality and, yeah.
Well, stay with us. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, Houthi rebels killed 2 sailors after the latest missile attack on ships in the Red Sea. Welcome back. 2 sailors have been killed following a missile attack by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. These are the first deaths since the Yemeni-based fighters started attacking vessels in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, and comes despite an international naval security operation. Our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn reports from Jerusalem.
The latest victim of high seas Houthi hostile action in what was this time a fatal attack. The vessel, True Confidence in Better Times, struck on the same day as the Houthis took on the US Navy and attacked one of its destroyers, the USS Carney, with attacker bomb drones. With its Red Sea strategy clearly not succeeding, in Washington, the US government had this response to the lethal attack on the unarmed merchant vessel.
Today, the Houthis have killed innocent civilians by continuing their reckless attacks against international commercial shipping, which impacts countries throughout the world. These reckless attacks by the Iran-backed Houthis have not only disrupted global trade and commerce, but also taken the lives of international seafarers simply doing their jobs. We offer our condolences, obviously, to the families of those who lost their lives, and again condemn the Houthis for these attacks.
In a tweet, the British Embassy in Sana'a, Yemen, reported at least 2 innocent sailors have died, calling it sad but inevitable. Britain and America said airstrikes started 6 weeks ago would degrade and deter the Houthi attacks. In fact, they're getting worse. Since the attacks began, more than 40 ships have been hit or hijacked, but the last 7 days have been particularly disastrous. The first to sink going down over the weekend with toxic fertiliser on board. Then an Indian vessel set on fire on Monday, and now the first fatalities. The Houthis appear to be running rings around US-British efforts to stop them. One of the world's busiest shipping lanes, now its most dangerous, where vessels and now lives are in growing danger, with no end in sight to the Houthis' aggression.
Well, let's bring in Dominic, who joins us live from Jerusalem. And Dom, I mean, we can see the volatility and things escalating. We've been talking about that for the last couple of months in the region. You've just covered it. But also, we had Benny Gantz, the Israeli minister here in the UK, and he had to listen to some quite tough words from Lord Cameron.
He did, but first of all about what happened in the Red Sea today, because I think it's a pretty significant escalation, the fact that we've had fatalities now and what it says about the strategy that Britain and America have been pursuing in these airstrikes against the Houthis. The plan was that it should deter and degrade that Houthi threat that's been attacking shipping in the Red Sea, a vital shipping lane now for more than 6 weeks. But it's just not working, and that it is not succeeding. And so it poses some pretty big challenges to the West, because it seems to be provoking the Houthis into even more aggressive and daring action. They took action today against the USS Carney, as I said in that report, an American destroyer, and used bomb-laden drones and anti-ship ballistic missiles against that destroyer. I think it highlights what we've been saying for a while now, which is that as long as the war in Gaza that goes on and on, as long as that continues, that obviously Benny Gantz was talking to Rishi Sunak and David Cameron about today, the longer that goes on, the greater the risk, or the constant threat continues of escalation, of that war becoming much more of a regional conflict. Because if you imagine one of those missiles getting through, either sinking the USS Carney or killing American naval sailors rather than merchant seamen on the other vessel, we could be talking about a very different story tonight. Could be talking about expansion and escalation of the conflict. And I think the worry is that there is no progress towards even a temporary peace in this war. Those ceasefire talks still bogged down in mutual recrimination in Cairo. Pretty depressing outlook at the moment, and still no sign of any ceasefire ahead of Ramadan.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on a couple of those points. On the ceasefire, I mean, there were all sorts of deadlines and targets and ultimatums put for it to sort of happen by March the 10th. And you know, there doesn't seem to be like anything is sort of moving on that.
No, there was hope building over the weekend. There was a growing sense of optimism, and that's all sort of come unstuck over the last few days in Cairo. Israel didn't send a delegation to Cairo. Hamas has been there. Hamas says it's responded to this peace plan, this ceasefire plan that would involve the exchange of prisoners and hostages and a much longer truce this time round, and that would raise the possibility of maybe a permanent cessation of hostilities. But Israel wasn't there because they say Hamas has not come up with a list of hostages that they would release. And I think the bind for Israel is that Hamas has not really changed its negotiating position since negotiations began at the end of last year. In fact, even before that, they still want they want Gaza clear of Israeli troops. They still want Gazans to be able to go back to their homes, and they want to see a permanent ceasefire. And while Israel is facing that intransigence in terms of negotiations, patience is clearly running out, both in America and in Britain. Benny Gantz, a rival to Benjamin Netanyahu, but also a member of the War Cabinet, getting pretty clear instructions, I think, from both Britain and America, from the Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister today, and American counterparts, that there is no real appetite for Israel going in harder into Rafah, for instance, into Gaza. A lot more humanitarian aid needs to go in. And the Israelis are saying that can't happen until there's a ceasefire, and they don't believe that's possible until more progress is made in these negotiations. And for whatever reason, that progress is simply not coming.
Dom, thank you, as always, for all of your analysis there. Now, as the Foreign Secretary talks about patience running thin over the conflict in Gaza, I've been getting an assessment on the latest situation there. The Norwegian Refugee Council is a humanitarian organisation working in Gaza and the West Bank. Their Secretary-General, Jan Egeland, has recently been to Rafah and Gaza, and I spoke to him a little earlier today. Jan, you've just returned from Gaza. If you can tell us a little bit more about what the experience was like there for you, because, of course, we continue to see these horrifying images come out from the Strip.
Yeah, and it's even worse when you're there, because you're among people in utter desperation, in destruction beyond belief, and with hopelessness without belief, because this is the most trapped civilian population under the worst bombardment in modern history against any civilian population. And we're not even getting in the emergency aid that this bombarded population is in need of.
Jan, I just want you to just build on that a little bit. You said it's much worse than the images that we're seeing. Just exactly what were you seeing?
Well, I was all over the Rafah area and at the very southern end of Gaza, which is the last escape, really. There was 250,000 people there. Now an additional 1.1 million people have fled here, which means that when you go to a school, there are 4,000 or 5,000 people crammed together, 50 people per classroom, 5,000 people sharing 18 overflowing latrines. So the smell, the stench, the seeing of these children completely malnourished, epidemic disease. We're giving as much aid as we can. We're trying to get in more aid, which is not easy. We cannot stop this bombardment. Only Israel and its allies can stop it.
We saw the tragedy that unfolded just a few days ago, where over 100 people were killed as they were trying to get to the aid because of Israeli forces opening fire. And then we continue to hear about the trucks that can't get in. We continue to hear about, I mean, the United States doing that airdrop. It's all just one tragedy after another.
300,000 people are in famine. The name of the border crossing next door is called Karni. There is another one, Erez. I've been going through there many times in my life. Trucks could go there immediately. And then the US and others are forced to resort to the most primitive, the least precise, the most chaotic of aid anywhere, which is airdrops. It's not going to solve the situation.
Then there's the issue around UNRWA, Israel accusing several UNRWA staff of being involved in the October 7 attack, which has further complicated the situation. We've spoken to UNRWA here on this program. They've said we've launched an investigation, we've taken swift action, we've, sacked those people involved, and we have an independent inquiry. But frankly, the largest aid provider to the Gaza Strip is now finding itself still waiting to see if anyone will restart the much needed sort of aid and money and supplies that they need.
Indeed. I mean, there is one dominant, important aid organization in the Gaza Strip, and it's UNRWA. When that is defunded, none of the others of us, including we in NRC that have 68 workers, providing as much as we can under the circumstances. We cannot substitute UNRWA. Israel drops these allegations in the media. They never presented it to UNRWA. They never given it to the member states. They never given it now to the investigators who are looking into this. These are mere allegations, and still the donors dropped the aid, which means that UNRWA will soon run out of money, and then will be the total collapse of the lifeline to this civilian population.
Jan, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
That was Jan Egeland speaking to me earlier on the situation in Gaza. Let's stay with the theme of aid, because there was no significant announcement on foreign aid spending in today's budget by the Chancellor. When he took office in November, the Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron said the UK had a moral mission to help the world's poorest. While Jeremy Hunt reaffirmed the UK's commitment to Ukraine, there were no promises from either him or the Labour Party on expanding international aid. Well, let's discuss this with our panel this evening. Lord Darroch, who joins us, as well as Nimco Ali. And Nimco, I mean, it's a sort of balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between what needs to happen for this country and the responsibility to assist with foreign aid.
No, it is 100%. And I think one of the key things is that the reduction from the 0.7% to 0.5 wasn't a political decision, but it was an economic one. Because I think with COVID, it was seen in the fact that they weren't able to meet that target, which is something that the government has said clearly. And I'm actually quite impressed and pleased by the fact that they've said that when the financial situation changed, that the 0.7% commitment is still there. So I think that's something
Do you think that will ever happen?
I think it will happen. I think it will happen. I think it will happen both under Labour and both under the Conservative Party as it stands at the moment. And I think that was a commitment that was made both by, I'm not sure what was made by Liz Truss, but I know by this current Prime Minister, and something that was said by Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister.
I guess it's also a question of soft power, isn't it? You know, foreign aid is part of Britain's soft power.
Yeah, it is part of it, absolutely. And the 0.7%, when it was in place, was, I can tell you, a really effective tool in diplomacy. And it gave us real weight, particularly on international development policy, but more widely than that. And look, post-Brexit, remember, it was all about, has been all about global Britain. And of course, we'd all like to see and expect to see the UK playing a global role. But it's quite hard to say we're now global, it's global Britain, and then immediately withdraw, I mean, take your aid budget down quite as far as we did. The sooner they get it back to 0.7%, the better. But I think it's going to be a few years yet, because I just don't think the money's there.
Yeah, and that is the big question. They say when the money comes. Let's just have a look at this chart, which looks at sort of global aid spending in 2022 by the gross national income of each country. As we've been saying, the UK spends 0.5% of its GNI on humanitarian aid. And then you can see some of the other countries. Obviously, I've looked at other charts where, you know, the United States is really leaps and bounds ahead of anyone else. And the UK, as you can see, is quite far down when it comes to that chart.
Yeah, but it's not really necessarily just about the percentage, but it's about the impact that it does. So one of the major problems I had as somebody that works in the international development space and somebody that works with African organisations is that the way we gave money was actually quite restrictive. So the way that the UK gave money was to either pre-existing organisations that they were funding, or they were funding So what do
you think needs to happen? Because there were concerns that when that money was slashed, billions, it impacted hundreds of thousands.
I don't think it directly did not impact millions of people. I think there's I've written on this on several occasions, the fact that NGOs and others are happy to use the pictures of black women and starving African children as their kind of end-year targets and so on. But seldom does actually money really get to those people. So in terms of the expenditure that we have, very little of that gets to the ground, and very little of that gets to women organisations. So ultimately, we could actually do better if we spent differently. And that's one of the key things that we're going to have a conversation with the current Foreign Secretary. So there's going to be dramatic stats that are coming out on Friday about the rise of FGM globally, and a lot of that is committed to the way that we've actually spent money. So ultimately, it is not about the numbers for me in terms of the percentage, but how we give the money.
How the money is spent. Nimco Ali, Lord Darroch, thank you both for joining us on tonight's panel. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, I'm joined in the studio by the filmmaker using the everyday lives of Palestinian people to tell the story of the ongoing Middle East conflict.
In this study, we're trying to model fetal development. We're trying to model how the babies develop in the late stage of pregnancy. So this started by looking at the amniotic fluid, which is a solution that surround and protect the baby during development. And we look at the cells, at the various cell types that are present in this resource. We identified progenitors, we identified cells that are stem cells and are specific to certain tissues of the fetus. And we decided to try to grow them into what the press is calling mini organs. We prefer to call them organoids. The idea is to use these organoids to model fetal development, so to model how the human tissues are developing, to use them to model disease. And so we tried to do this with a disease that affects the development of the lung. And so what we've seen is that in the presence of this disease, the organoids that we grow are different from the one of normal babies. And based on this, we expect in the future to be able to use this technology to test drugs that are specific for these babies, so in a personalized medicine manner, and basically use these as a predictive model for how the pregnancies is going to unravel. This research is done both at UCL and Great Ormond Street Hospital, and in the lab, together with Professor Paolo De Copi, which is my mentor, we put these cells into three-dimensional culture. So it's organoids are something that is getting quite established in medical technology. It's a discovery that is around since 2009. And these cells are basically grown in three dimension, in a bubble of gel, and they expand and form these mini masses of tissue. The way we see it going forward is to use this as advanced diagnostic method, because in theory, it should be able to predict how severe certain disease would be as a drug testing method, and then the sky's the limit. With this platform, we are able to access the pregnancy while the pregnancy is still going on.
Okay.
And this is very relevant because we can theoretically intervene while the baby is still developing in a personalized manner. We don't really manipulate anything here. We just take cells out, expand them in culture, and that's it. There's no, we don't bring them back, we don't make them into something that could develop in a fetus, an embryo, or whatever. We're simply taking a snapshot of what's the status of the tissue at that specific moment in development.
Welcome back. A new film is seeking to highlight the impact of the ongoing Middle East conflict by focusing on the life of one Palestinian. In The Teacher, Oscar-nominated filmmaker Farah Nabulsi focuses on the struggle for some people as they try to reconcile political resistance with everyday life. Let's just take a look.
It is shocking to me how many of these boys have been in detention. How do you begin to keep them on track in an environment like this?
Some of them are very resilient. Others are not so much. Yaqub was a good student. He came out angry.
Well, that was The Teacher, and I'm pleased to say the director of The Teacher, Farah, is here with me in the studio. Farah, you actually made this film about a year and a half ago, but so many of the issues that it touches on is very relevant to what's going on today.
Yeah, this is a film that I wrote about 3 years ago. I shot it in militarily occupied, colonized Palestine in the West Bank about a year and a half ago. It's ultimately about the pursuit of justice. And it was inspired by numerous conversations and time I've spent with dozens of Palestinians in the West Bank who've experienced much of the sort of cruel, absurd things that take place in the film firsthand, like children being processed through military detention, like home demolitions, like illegal Israeli settler violence and vandalism. Those are things that have been going on for decades. And so in some ways, it's a timeless story. And in other ways, it's arrived at this really crucial juncture in the discourse on Palestine as, you know, Israel is...
Well, I guess if you look at the current situation, when you were filming there and you know, when you wrote this piece, did you think that we would be where we are today when we see everything that's unfolded since October the 7th?
No, I don't think anyone could have predicted what's happening today. I mean, this is unprecedented. We are watching a plausible genocide unfold in front of us. So no, I didn't anticipate that. But at the same time, like I said, this oppression, this injustice, this discrimination has been going on for decades. And so I could definitely foresee that it would still be going on right now, as per the film, but not what we're witnessing in Gaza. That's unprecedented and beyond.
When you talk about justice, people seeking justice, I guess it's going to be a whole other conversation once this conflict ends, because justice means different things for different people. And I guess both sides are seeking some form of justice, you know, and that can translate into things like revenge, for example.
I think that's definitely a theme of the film, actually, this idea that the teacher is trying to guide his student to sort of differentiate between the pursuit of justice and revenge. But I can't help but think when tens of thousands of Palestinian children are being orphaned, or tens of thousands of Palestinians are having their children killed or maimed and so forth, if there is no justice, surely, at least for the majority, a deep-rooted hate will develop and manifest, and without justice, the pursuit of revenge. So again, it's this sort of...
And that's the worry here. So many people, guests that we've had on the programme, analysts who have spoken about this, what is going on could lead to something even more dangerous, given there are so many children now that have been orphaned.
Absolutely. I mean, and at the end of the day, we don't just think about the deaths and the injuries. Think about the sort of lives that have been uprooted and destroyed. And again, I come back to this idea of the student and the teacher, the schools that have been destroyed, the universities, the hospitals. So it's not just about death and injury, it's also about how do they carry on, how do they exist, how do they survive? And that's also going to lead, and we're talking about 2 million people here, not just the 100,000 who are killed and maimed and injured, but an entire population. So the level of trauma and recovery, where are we going with that?
And it could go on for generations more.
Let's hope not. You know, I'm somebody who's hopeful that at some point we can kind of dismantle all of that oppression and see a better future for everyone.
Yeah, well, Farah, we're grateful that you've joined us here on the programme to talk about The Teacher, as you say, and you're on your way to Norway to continue to promote your film. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it for tonight's programme. Thanks for watching. We will again, of course, be back tomorrow at 9 p.m. and the news at 10 is next. Good night.